Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. I was trying to think of another video to make. I had planned to do a reaction to an album, and then I listened to it, and it was a 20-track long album, and I was just kind of disappointed with the whole thing, so I decided to put that one aside. There's no need to be negative if you don't have too much to say. Basically, I have the same criticism of every track, and I thought, okay, so what other music have I been listening to lately? And I've had a few CDs out of the library that have given me mixed to great reactions, and they're all greatest hits collections. So far on this channel, I've only talked about albums, and in a way that makes sense because, at least in some cases, albums amount to a kind of literary vision. They at very least represent the songs all recorded together in a point in an artist's lifetime, and sometimes there's more of a concept going on with them. At the same time, most of the CDs I had growing up were greatest hits collections. Some, such as my first Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and Elvis collections, I have really strong sentimental relationships to. And seeing as I continue to come across these CDs, and they're a great way to discover an artist, one of the frustrations I actually had when I started really listening to albums as part of this process is realizing, wait, they have amazing hits and then the rest is boring. And I think that's because I was raised on greatest hits collections. I'm not used to, filler tracks, which, the best albums, your Gracelands, your Thrillers, your Purple Rains, I mean, they don't have filler at all, but even a lot of pretty good albums have filler. So greatest hits albums can still bring a lot of joy, even if you're being all pretentious and only want to listen to albums as originally conceived by the artists. And right now, I have 3 greatest hits collections out of the library. I have the best of the Grateful Dead, the Carpenters, 40/40, and Lionel Richie, the definitive collection. So the great thing with all of these collections is they all, to some degree, served as my introduction to these artists. All of them were artists I'd certainly heard a song or two by before, but I'd never owned an album of theirs. I'd never taken the time to really systemically listen to them at all. So this was my first chance to really get a sense of what they sounded like over a significant portion of their careers. I mean, this Grateful Dead collection, which we're going to start with, it covers 2 decades. And I didn't know what to expect of the Grateful Dead. On the one hand, I like their iconography. I like that they're associated with San Francisco hippie culture. I was in San Francisco in 2016, and I took a tour of the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, and I took a photo outside of the Grateful Dead house because, it felt like a cool historical moment to have been there. But I sort of felt awkward at the time because other than knowing that there's an ice cream flavor called Cherry Garcia and having heard a cover of Friend of the Devil played by a wedding band once, I really had very little relationship to the Grateful Dead. So on the one hand, they seemed like they had my vibe to them, but I've also heard them described as a jam band, and that was a bit of a red flag for me because I like songs with a lot of lyrics. I don't like songs where, the guitar solos go on forever. That's what, got me in trouble with Pink Floyd bands. And I right away had both experiences. So I turned the CD on, listened to it through my headphones while I was at my job, and I thought, okay, I kind of like the vibe of this. And then when I sat down to, actually listen to it for making this video, I started to have second thoughts. On the one hand, it had those folksy sounds, clear voices, organs, twangy guitar, the good ratio of lyrics to music that I liked. But, with the first few tracks, the Golden Road to Unlimited Devotion, Cream Puff War, Born Cross-Eyed, and Dark Star, even though I liked the general vibe of them, I wasn't remembering any of them, and I realized it's because there's a certain melodic complexity to them, as well as an anarchic quality that comes from the jamming, that even though they almost sound like normal folk songs, they're not quite there. There's something about the jam aesthetic that sort of makes them pass for normal 60s music when you listen to them in the background, but when you listen a little closer, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? Why aren't these melodies staying in my head the way things by bands with similar sounds, like the Doors, might do? Towards the middle of the first disc, I should mention this is a 2-disc collection. They did have a run of a number of tracks that did stick with me a bit better. I'd mentioned before that I knew the song Friend of the Devil, and that's absolutely one I like. It's a pretty straight folk rock tune. There's constant singing throughout. You can pick up on the melody. Then there's Casey Jones with its refrain of Riding that train, high on cocaine. Pretty provocative, pretty easy to remember. I also thought the song Ripple was pretty beautiful, and I like the folk bluesy vibe of Truckin'. And then there was a song called Eyes of the World, which didn't quite work as well for me because the vocals were a bit muted, but at least they used the guitar to get a bit of a hook in there. So it felt like at that point in their career, because I think this collection is chronological, they were figuring out how to put together a hit. Then they start to get weird again. So towards the end of track 17, towards the end of disc 1, track 17, you have a song called Scarlet Begonias, which was pretty cool, but in a pretty weird way. There's a Latin-sounding rap kind of, maybe it's a rumba rhythm at the end that someone melodically screams over. So no melody stuck with me, but I appreciated it as a creative experiment. Then disc 2 starts with what I thought was a pretty understated song called Terrapin Station. And I looked up what exactly the song was because it felt like it was going on for a while and realized it's a 17-minute jam. Of the songs I knew previously, I guess it's fairly similar, both in length and sort of musical structure, to Cat Stevens' Foreigner Suite. Again, a sort of really long, mid-70s kind of song. I did feel Terrapin Station was filled in a little better than Foreigner Suite because I guess the Grateful Dead is a whole band thing. They are used to more complex musical arrangements, whereas Cat Stevens, outside of Foreigner Suite, was more of a folk singer. Eventually, on disc 2, they do get to another song where I'd heard of it before, but had never heard it before, and it's called Touch of Grey. It kind of reminded me of Bruce Springsteen in the sense that it mostly had a sort of classic rock to it, but then there was a sort of a bright synth contributing to its hooks, and so that was a nice little memorable track. And then after that, you get a few more melodic tracks. Black Muddy River, it sounded to me like the end of the record. And then you have, at the actual end of the record, you have a song called Standing on the Moon with a nice little folky deliver. And you get some chanting of Ring Around the Rosie and Throwing Stones. That song mentions ashes to ashes. And I realized eventually it's quoting that old nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie. But I guess for the last few years, whenever I hear ashes to ashes, I assume David Bowie, so it was kind of funny to remember, oh, it's actually a biblical reference. It's older than that. So overall, I'm going to try and remember the Grateful Dead songs that I really liked. So Friend of the Devil, Casey Jones, Ripple, and Touch of Grey. Other than that, the jam thing doesn't really work for me, but it does work as 60s kind of background music while you're studying. My next experience was with the Carpenters, and this, another 2-disc greatest hits collection, is called 40/40. I think for a long time I was confused about who the Carpenters were. I assumed they were an older, more country band than they actually are, because I think I had them confused with June Carter's family, the Carter family band. It has a good opening track of Yesterday Once More. It makes sense as an opening track. It's reflecting on a history of a life in music, and it has a memorable chorus. Every sha-la-la-la, every whoa. But its slowness kind of cued me into the frustration I have with this Carpenter sound. So Karen Carpenter, apparently she has what's considered one of the greatest voices of all time, a unique voicing, a unique range. And what I particularly like about her voice is it manages to be beautiful and smooth, and it's good in that way. It doesn't have to do any showing off. So, you know, when you hear someone like Aretha Franklin, or, you know, even someone like Elvis, you're not thinking they have a good voice because of their range, even though they obviously have that. You're thinking it because there's some weird tricks in their voice. There's some vibrato. Whereas Karen Carpenter has a very subtly good voice. You listen to her and you think, I could sing like her, and the truth is you probably can't, but it's just all very subtle and smooth. Now, the problem with that smoothness is it seems to contribute to a sort of general melancholy feel in a lot of these tracks. And the worst offender of this, which apparently comes from the Carpenters' first album, is their cover of the Beatles' Ticket to Ride. Now, Ticket to Ride, very good Beatles song, but it's not brilliant enough that you can really mess up with its structure. It's the perfect speed, just as it is, and they slow down the chorus to "She's got a ticket to ride," or "He's got a ticket to ride," and it takes out all the power of the song, and there's just a constant melancholy feel to the Carpenters. Now, on some songs, I love melancholy. So they do a version of the song, Where Do I Go From Here? I first heard that one sung by Barry Manilow a few years ago, and that's a great melancholy song filled with energy, and I think it works because the melancholy sound of the Carpenters matches perfectly with the vibe of the song. What I don't like is when a song that's not all that sad and sometimes even happy still has a melancholy feel. So I think that's why I find a lot of jazz music depressing, and that's the problem I had with a lot of the Carpenters tracks. That said, because this is 2 discs, 20 songs each, it did give me a lot of great songs. Another song that stuck me was the song, "Oh, I'm on top of the world looking down on creation, only explanation I can find." And my wife pointed out to me that I had heard that song before, though I hadn't noticed, in the Tim Burton movie Dark Shadows. That's an interesting movie. It got bad reviews, but what actually it is it's a good movie for a lot of its runtime, and then it has a very underwhelming ending. I think because Tim Burton was inspired by a TV show, so he didn't feel the need to bring his whole movie together. Maybe he envisioned it as more of a long-term project to revive the TV show. But point is, it's a better movie than it gets credit for, and it makes great use contrasting that sweet little Carpenter song with the Tim Burton background. Other good songs on there, they have a cover of Tim Hardin's Reason to Believe. Karen Carpenter really shows off her pipes in Neil Sedaka's Solitaire. They cover Klaatu's Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. You wouldn't expect this sort of sweet folk duo to perform an outer space song, but I think their version ended up being more famous than Klaatu. They have a good song called Hurting Each Other. I guess I'd describe it as one of those 60s pop songs that is both very simple yet has an epic feel to it, kind of like Everlasting Love. So, yeah, I guess overall, 40 songs, a lot of good songs. I just wish there was a bit more shaking it up, a bit more breaking out the melancholy. I love the old song, Please Mr. Postman. I love when the Beatles do it. It's still pretty good when the Carpenters do it, but even with, I know, an upbeat song like that, they don't seem to be able to break that melancholy funk. Now, of these 3 CDs, the one I really had the best experience here was Lionel Richie, The Definitive Collection. So I picked this up after Professor of Rock did a video on his fond memories of Lionel Richie, and when I watched that video, it was the first time I'd heard of the Commodores. So apparently a significant part of Lionel Richie's career was spent in this band, the Commodores, and the Commodore songs are kind of scattered amongst the Lionel Richie solo songs in this collection. And it just feels like this CD was originally 18 tracks long. They added 2 more to it. And you have to go very deep into this CD before you get a track that's boring. And I know I said at the beginning of this video, these are greatest hits collections, and greatest hits collections can easily blow naturally constructed albums out of the water. But I think Lionel Richie, it seems, clearly had an ear for a hit, because this seems to blow even a lot of greatest hits collections out of the water. Every song sounds a little different. Every song has a nice little hook to it. And before getting this collection, I mean, I knew Hello and I knew All Night Long. And I also knew 3 Times a Lady, though I didn't know that was Lionel Richie or the Commodores. It was just a song they played on airplanes when you plugged your headphones into the internal music system. And it's just each song, starting with Easy, that was a real pleasant surprise, Running with the Night, Endless Love, that like they all have their own little hook to them. I noticed with his song Do It To Me, and then thinking back to the earlier songs, Lionel Richie really likes to take his time with his lyrical delivery. Like, all of these songs at the end of the day are just romantic songs. There's nothing profound to them per se, but he drags out all the nuances in emotion about love by really sitting on his words. Hello, is it me you're looking for? Like the opening, I feel I've touched you. It makes it sound like he's singing something far more mysterious than a love song. And I guess for a lot of people, to quote Sufjan Stevens, love is a mystery. Finally, another interesting thing with this collection, when it was first released in 2003, it ended with the 2000 song Angel, which is Lionel Richie entering the modern pop age. There's a big drum machine and his voice is really echoey. And even as someone who doesn't instinctively like modern music, I think he sort of brings out the joy in what I think of as modern music there, because it's such a big echoey sound. It conveys a future that is mysterious yet vast and exciting and hopeful. And when they add 2 more tracks to the album, they come up with another solid way to end the record, which is Goodbye, which kind of sounds like a 90s Disney belty kind of song. And it fits better with the rest of the album than Angel does. But again, so many great songs on here. I like how Lionel Richie puts on a country voice for Sail On, so I had to look up a video of it to make sure it was actually him and not a other member of the Commodores who was singing. Dancing on the Ceiling, also, that one also has a slightly newer sound than the others. But overall, though I had different experiences with these different collections and far more universally happy with Lionel than with the other two, discovered some great songs on all of them. I'm sure I'll cover all of them at open mics at some point. And to their credit, Grateful Dead here have some great cover art, so there's arguments to adding any of these to your collection, and I'm glad I was able to get them out from the Toronto Public Library. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.